It's time to start your engines and rev up your assault cannons, because today we're going to be looking at the Baal Predator. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel where we're all about getting the best out of your miniatures on the tabletop. Today we'll be continuing with our Blood Angels review series, and we'll be taking a look at the Baal Predator, the unique anti-infantry murder tank of the Blood Angels. We'll take a look at its rules, any obvious combos and synergies we can see on the tabletop, and how I would run them in a game of 40k. Now the Baal Predator is a tank that I have a fair bit of experience with, though mainly in previous editions, as it was the main battle line tank of my 5th edition Blood Angels tank list, where their overcharged engines meant that the tanks would be zipping around all over the place, firing at full capacity. It was a fun list to play, though very non-traditional from a Blood Angels point of view, and it's a bit unfortunate that the overcharged engines rule doesn't really carry over to 8th. In the background, the Baal Predator derives from an STC construct that the Blood Angels recovered during the Great Crusade. Controversially, they didn't hand over the STC to the Adeptus Mechanicus, and instead chose to keep the tank for themselves, so it doesn't see wider use throughout the Imperium. It is traditionally armed with a twin assault cannon backed up with heavy bolters or sponson-mounted heavy flamers, and therefore is quite a good choice for supporting the Blood Angels' typical assault patterns, being furious and close-range fire support. It has Lucifer pattern engines that the Blood Angels reverse engineered and applied to a lot of their vehicles out of their motor pool, thus increasing their speed and manoeuvrability. The forces of the Adeptus Mechanicus would really like to get their hands on one, even if it was wrecked, to better understand the secrets of these engines, though I suspect they could probably work out how to put an assault cannon on top of a regular Predator, with all of the innovation that Mr. Call has been doing recently. So let's take a look at how this thing performs on the tabletop. So the Baal Predator is a heavy support choice for Codex Blood Angels, and its cheapest loadout will cost you 115 points, with the Flamestorm Cannon as the turret option. It has a stat line exactly the same as the regular Predator: movement 12, weapon skill 6, ballistic skill 3 up, strength 6, toughness 7, 11 wounds, 3 attacks, and a 3 up save, so pretty fast and manoeuvrable there. That Flamestorm Cannon is a heavy D6 8-inch weapon with strength 6, AP-2, damage 2, and like all flamer type weapons, it automatically hits its target. So the main thing to note about this is that it's very close range. It's got a decent profile that will do decent damage against pretty much any target you throw it at, but my main concern is that you have to put your Predator quite so close to the enemy to get any damage off at all. It puts it in prime spot for reprisals in terms of either shooting or maybe a enemy unit managing to lock it up in close combat. The Baal Predator can swap out this Flamestorm Cannon for a twin assault cannon for an additional 19 points, putting your base tank up to 134 points when equipped this way. As we all know, the twin assault cannon is strength 6, AP-1, damage 1, and 12 shots at 24-inch range, so we'll actually put out a fairly similar damage output to the Flamestorm Cannon against a lot of targets, and probably do slightly more damage against most. The big advantage though is that 24-inch range rather than 8-inch range, meaning the Predator can skulk back a little bit out of harm's way and also reach targets that are slightly further away too. Out of the two, I much prefer the twin assault cannon, even if it does cost a few more points. It has the option of sponson weapons, either 2 sets of heavy bolters or 2 sets of heavy flamers. The heavy bolters will cost you 10 points each, and the heavy flamers will cost you 14 points each. In my opinion, I'd much rather have the heavy bolters for the extra range and save the points, compared with the slightly better damage output that those 2 sets of heavy flamers will have. The heavy flamers combined with the Flamestorm Cannon though do synergise quite well, and could make it very nasty in Overwatch. My main issue with this is that there's just so many ways to mitigate Overwatch, either charging from out of line of sight, charging in with something that just doesn't really care about being hit by heavy flamers or the Flamestorm Cannon, such as the Imperial Knight, piling into the Baal Predator when you charge a different unit, or just charging out of the 8-inch range, so there's no Overwatch at all. In addition, you can also take the Hunter-Killer Missile and the Storm Bolter. I would always take the Storm Bolter, and the Hunter-Killer Missile I'd probably take if I was thinking about giving any buffs to the Baal Predator, such as a Captain or Lieutenant to re-roll some dice, but if it was just hitting on its standard 3-up, then I might not bother. As per most of the Space Marine armoury, it explodes on the roll of a 6, and targets nearby will suffer D3 mortal wounds if it does, and it has smoke launchers that can be used to forfeit its shooting to give it a -1 to hit. could potentially be a positive if you're thinking about running the Flamestorm variant and you can't get it in range for a turn. But every turn that it doesn't spend shooting will be a turn wasted, as that's basically all it does. Finally, the Baal Predator has a special rule called Overcharged Engines to represent those nice Lucifer pattern engines, which means that when it advances, you roll 2d6 and pick the highest for the advance roll. This is quite a weak and disappointing special rule in my opinion, as every turn that it advances, it won't be shooting, so you're really not going to be wanting to advance it too much, as rolling 2 dice and picking the highest is quite a weak buff to the advance roll. On average it'll give you an extra inch of movement each time you roll, which isn't exactly spectacular. I would have much preferred them just to represent the Lucifer pattern engines by giving it an extra 2 inches of movement or something like that, because unless you advance and forfeit shooting, then this rule isn't going to take effect. So overall, the Baal Predator is a close range assault support unit. You can either go for hovering at 24-inch range with the twin assault cannons and heavy bolters, and scything down enemy infantry, or getting right up in the opponent's face and burning them with flamers and a flamestorm cannon. So now let's take a look at the different ways that we can get more out of the Baal Predator with buffs and stratagems. Firstly, and probably most obviously, you can combine these guys with captains and lieutenants to give yourself some nice reroll 1s to hit and wound, chaplains for a +1 to hit or +1 to wound litany, and perhaps Dante for the full rerolls. It's a shame that Dante's Chapter Master ability isn't with the new wording yet, as it means that if these guys move, they'll still only be re-rolling those 1s and 2s, rather than the 3s as well, which they won't hit on because of the -1 penalty for moving and shooting heavy weapons. Tech Marines are also a consideration when you're fielding armour. Having 1 pile some wounds back on a damaged predator could certainly help, as well as providing a countercharge threat. There are a few stratagems that can help out the Baal Predator. Firstly, the Blood Angels have the unique vehicle one called Lucifer Pattern Engines, which is a 1 command point stratagem to add 6 inches to the movement of a Blood Angel's vehicle, again that advances in your movement phase. Now, unlike its standard buff, it means that you actually do gain a decent amount of movement with this, and it could be potentially useful, say late game, if you need to absolutely grab an objective, and your advance roll itself won't take you far enough. The Baal Predator actually has a unique line in this stratagem, which means that you increase its movement by d6 plus 6. So in theory, you could have a Baal Predator move up to 24 inches a turn if you rolled a 6 on that advanced dice. So good for late game objective grabbing, but again not really helpful for the Baal Predator's main role, which is rolling about gunning things down, as advancing stops you from shooting. These stratagems would be so much better if they just increased the standard move characteristic so it could move and still shoot. As it is, they're very niche in when you'd actually want to use them, and Blood Angels really want to be saving their command points for their nice close combat buffs, to be honest. Blood Angels have the access to kill shot, but I don't believe it affects the Baal Predator, due to the wording on the rule saying it affects predators, but it isn't written as the predator keyword, it's just written as predators. So that means it's the predator tank, not the Baal Predator, unfortunately. Which is a shame, because that could give the Baal Predator some actually really quite scary firepower with +1 to wound and +1 to damage. From the new Blood of Baal, we've got Big Guns Never Tire for 1 command point, as Baal Predators are probably going to be wanting to move to get their short range weaponry into killing range. This could be potentially useful to squeeze a few more shots out of your Predator. Obviously, if you're using the assault cannons and heavy bolters, it won't have any effect on the Flamestorm, as that doesn't roll to hit. So how would I field Baal Predators on the battlefield? As I've already discussed, I prefer the twin assault cannon and heavy bolter option, as this gives you a lot more range and flexibility, rather than shoehorning yourself into throwing your Baal Predator right into the throat of the enemy. I'd want to be using these as main battle line tanks, somewhere in the centre of the Blood Angels army, and I'd want to be just getting into 24-inch range each turn with that decent movement that they have, and trying to thin out the enemy hordes and screening units to hopefully let the Blood Angels assault units jump down and smash up something nasty. I'd certainly consider using a captain and lieutenant to buff their shooting, and I'd consider giving these guys jump packs and some close combat gear, so if any enemy units came close enough to them, they could jump out and give them a good kicking with that red thirst. The Baal Predators will have particularly decent shooting first turn, due to the Devastator doctrine, making all of those heavy bolters and assault cannon shots to be AP-2. Even in a pure Blood Angels list, I could see some advantage to not bothering to move out of the Devastator doctrine, and not bothering to go to the Assault doctrine if you're including a decent amount of Blood Angels units with heavy weapons in your force. My main reason being is that the Blood Angels assault units tend to really kick in whatever they get into close combat with, whether or not they get one additional attack. So it might just be better to have better AP on all of your heavy guns, and let your assault units do what they do best, without worrying about going into assault doctrine. When you're deploying, you really want to think about stopping these guys from getting bogged down in close combat, as like I said with the Flamestorm version, even one unit touching the base of the Baal Predator will make it useless next turn, and even 24-inch range is not the safest with certain fast-moving threats. I strongly consider either screening them or sending in melee troops up in front of them, which will hopefully discourage the enemy from getting too close. In general, you're not going to want to get too close to the enemy with these guys, but towards the end of the game you might want to be thinking about throwing them on some objectives, which might actually be more help than cutting down a few more infantry people depending on what the game is looking like. And late in the game, any buff characters with jump packs that you had buffing the Baal Predators could jump forward to throw themselves into close combat. I certainly think about the stratagem to give them the extra movement if you're looking at scoring objectives. Not as one that you want to be using every turn, but one that you could use if it makes the difference between getting to an objective or not. So let's take a quick look at the competitors for the Baal Predator. The most obvious one in my mind being the Assault Cannon Razorback, which I'm sorry to say just flatly outperforms the Baal. Basically, a Razorback with twin assault cannons only costs 114 points, where the Baal Predator costs 134. The Razorback does lose 1 wound, so it's only 10 wounds rather than 11, but other than that the tanks are the same. They'll have the same firepower. Sure, you don't have the option of getting heavy bolters, but you could just save the points in heavy bolters and put that towards buying more Razorbacks. This is quite annoying that they're so unbalanced against each other, and I'm a bit disappointed that Games Workshop didn't address the Baal Predator or the regular Predator's points in Chapter Approved or the latest Space Marine Codex. If you did want to get a bit more of a competitive advantage out of your Baal Predators though, there's nothing really to stop you running them as Razorbacks with twin assault cannons, provided you don't have sponsons. They're both Rhino chassis tanks with a twin assault cannon on top, so you're pretty much WYSIWYG already from that point of view. The other slightly unfortunate comparison I'd like to highlight with the Baal Predator is against the Invicta Tactical Warsuit, which compares very nicely against the Baal for being almost exactly the same points cost, and either has the option of a very decent flamer, or a twin autocannon that is comparable worth to the Baal's twin assault cannon, but it also gets a whole smattering of different anti-infantry guns, and most importantly for a Blood Angels army can do melee well as well. Between these two units, I think it just really highlights how overcosted the Baal Predator is for what you get, and it's very annoying seeing as I own 3 of them. Don't get me wrong, Space Marines are decently strong at the moment, and the Baal Predator won't hold you back too much versus other armies, but from a purely list optimization point of view, Games Workshop really haven't balanced them well against their competitors, so I'm afraid they won't really be featuring in any competitive Blood Angels list that I run. I have run them for fun a few times in 8th edition though. They do put out decently reliable firepower, they're just a little bit underwhelming for how many points you pay for that firepower. So that's my overall review of the Baal. If you've got any thoughts or comments, please let me know down below. I'd certainly like to hear it if a Flamestorm Baal has ever achieved anything massively notable, as I feel that's the sort of unit that in certain games could absolutely dominate, even if it might not be the most competitive choice for taking against an all-comers list. If you can see any advantages that the Baal has over its competitors, also let me know. I would dearly like to have more excuses to put mine back on the table. As always, thanks for listening to Auspex Tactics. We'll be continuing our Blood Angels reviews over the next week or so feel free to subscribe if you'd like to see that. If you've been finding my content useful, feel free to support me on Patreon. Making all of these YouTubes takes a lot of my time, so if they are of use to you, any support would be appreciated. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.